Hi everyone, welcome to week 11 of the Oregon Conference 2017 Free Methodist Experience. This week we're going to be looking at how the pursuit of perfection and holiness led to the social justice emphasis of Methodism. I'm going to especially do that by looking at the story of Methodism as it comes to America in the time before the Free Methodist Church. The story of Methodism in America is quite a great one, especially in the first half of the 1800s. There's areas of the country where Methodism is the dominant theological thought pattern. This is especially true in the Midwest and the Plains, where as the Second Great Awakening happened in the push west, Methodism really began to flourish because it could be, under its itinerant system, as flexible and as mobile as the people who were moving. Methodism first comes to America long before that. It's about 1760s when several Irish immigrants from the Limerick area come across to what it would be New York colony at that point. And there's a few others that come in at the south. But they're very much part of the Anglican Church, just as Methodism is back in England. They go to the Anglican Church on the Sunday, then the Methodist Society during the week, and then the class and the band, and so on. So Methodism looks incredibly like Methodism in England, virtually identical. However, a crisis point happens, called the War of Independence. Because during the War of Independence, when it's finally over and America's won, the Anglican Church withdraws all its clergy. And the Episcopal Church, which is the form Anglicanism will take in America, had not yet been formed. So Wesley now has all these followers in America who have no clergy to give them the sacraments. So Wesley goes to several bishops in England and says, look, can you ordain one of my Methodists so that they can go to America and give sacraments, ordain others out there and that. And because of the politics involved, Wesley gets denied. So he takes his friend, Dr. Thomas Cook, and he ordains him himself, much to the disdain of Wesley's brother. Wesley would end up being epitomized in verse by his brother Charles. In one of his hymns he writes, Wesley his hands on Cook hath laid, but who hath laid hands on him? Nothing quite like being attacked by your brother in the middle of a church hymn. But Wesley ends up ordaining Cook and starts forming his Methodists as their own church, separate from Anglicanism in America, in 1784. And everything kicks off at the Christmas Conference, so called because the conference was held at Christmas time, 1784. There they accepted the Articles of Religion, which were adapted by Wesley from the Anglican 39 Articles. So the Articles of Religion we have in Chapter 1 of our discipline are the descendants of these articles, and they are the descendants of the 39 Articles of Anglicanism. At this conference also we see the election and ordination of Francis Asbury, first deacon, then elder, then bishop in 3 days. Okay, Francis Asbury would become the main leader of American Methodism. However, the promotion to bishop did not impress Wesley, and Wesley ends up falling out with both Cook and Asbury over the title bishop and the fact they want to name colleges after themselves. Okay, a lot of Methodist ministers go through Asbury Theological Seminary. Wesley really hated that Asbury had a college named after him, and he said it this way, but in one point, my dear brother, I am afraid that both the doctor, Cook, and you differ from me. I study to be little. You study to be great. I creep. You strut along. I found a school. You a college. Nay, and call it after your own names. One instance of this, of your greatness, has given me great concern. How dare you suffer to call yourself a bishop? I shudder. I start at the very thought. Men may call me a knave or a fool, a rascal, a scoundrel, and I am content. But they shall never by my consent call me bishop. For my sake, for God's sake, for Christ's sake, put a full end to this. And the short answer to that is they didn't. We still have colleges named after them, and the title of bishop still exists within American Methodism to this day. Now, despite that little tiff, Wesley still had a lot of influence on the early Methodists in America. The Methodism that would come out was still very Wesleyan in flavor. There was salvation for all, there was assurance, and there was a mature doctrine of entire sanctification, Christian perfection, and the pursuit of holiness. Full acceptance of Wesley's general rules was also taken in. Wesley's general rules were the rules that governed the life of Methodists, especially the life of those in societies, and if you didn't follow them, you could be kicked out of the society. Especially focused on were the rules for the simplicity of holy living. This was part of the stewardship emphasis of Methodism, and living on little so that we could give lots. Special attention would be paid to rules on superfluous adornments. Right up until the 1930s or 40s, it was frowned upon in American Methodism and Free Methodism to wear wedding rings, because they were a superfluous adornment that money had been spent on that could have been spent on something else. That's how far these rules went. So it's a very simplistic way of living in early American Methodism. They would even disown all members who did not denounce alcohol. And they came out strongly against slavery. They would say that they would take immediately some effectual method to extirpate the abomination from among us. Very strong language against slavery in the formation of early American Methodism. Now, as time goes on, though, obviously social forces and various things would interact with American Methodism, and it would change gradually over the next 80 years. It had some highs. First, it grew at an exponential rate, especially during the push west, due to the flexibility of itinerant ministries, and it would be hugely involved in the Second Great Awakening, 1790 to 1840. Methodism is what gave the Second Great Awakening its flavor of Arminianism and social justice. If you look at the history of that Second Great Awakening, works of Finney and various others, even the non-Methodists, even those from Reformed and Baptist backgrounds, start talking about a salvation that is for all, and the pursuit of holiness, and the importance of doing social justice acts. So that Second Great Awakening really had a strong Methodist flavor to it, even in non-Methodist circles. However, it also had some lows that would come after that. Firstly, it quickly lost its strength on slavery. It softened its stance just 6 months after the Christmas conference. The Methodist Episcopal Church, as it was known, would eventually split into the Methodist Episcopal Church North and the Methodist Episcopal Church South over the issue. And other offshoots would appear over the issues, especially the Wesleyans, the Nazarenes, and the Free Methodists. By the time 1860 rolls around, literally tens of thousands of Methodist clergy and leaders own hundreds of thousands of slaves. That is how different it became. They also, during this time, post Second Great Awakening, after 1840, really de-emphasize the pursuit of holiness. And Methodism just becomes almost not so much ritualistic, but very pattern holding. But very nominal. What we would often criticize people for today. They come and they do church on a Sunday, but they're not really interested in pursuing holiness. It became routine. It lost its heart. And as you probably realized in all that, what's coming out of this development, these highs of lows, issues of abolition and social justice, slavery, social justice. Don Dayton, back in the 1980s, wrote this text. It's a wonderful text. It's a shame it's out of print these days. If you can find it, read it. Discovering an Evangelical Heritage. And the whole book is an argument about how evangelicalism and the concept of evangelical in our history has rested on the importance of social justice. And he looks especially at the late 1700s and through the 1800s in different in Baptists, in African American, in Methodist, and how important social justice was to the transmission of the gospel message. So if you can get hold of it, it's a really good read. But as we go through this journey of understanding our approach to abolition social justice, let's start with the social holiness of John Wesley. Holiness and perfection is all about love for others. Remember, Christian perfection was about the moment where love wins out in the heart of the believer. And the only holiness is social holiness. You cannot be isolated by yourself and be holy just because you are pious and you do pious things. No. It must be centered around your love for the other, your love for God. And so the transformation of society happens through the transformation of individuals. We looked at this a lot last week in the idea of Christian perfection. Various things. This idea that it's in relationship and love that the gospel is shared. And social justice is therefore actions of Christian love done to display God's love. You've already heard me get on my soapbox at the last face-to-face about how this is not some humanistic endeavor to end poverty or end child hunger or end sexual abuse. We don't have a Starfleet mentality of the progressiveness of humankind. We're instead aware that sin is in every generation, and every generation has to start again. And the goal of social justice is to display Christian love. It is to display God's love. It is to incarnate the gospel message. It is to evangelize. It is to, for the glory of God. It is to show the kingdom here on earth. Here's an example of a social justice thing that's often been misunderstood. The abstinence from alcohol I was talking about a couple of slides ago. Abstinence from alcohol in Wesleyan Methodism was not about alcohol being a drink of the devil, or even about alcohol being evil. That is language that would later come out of the Prohibition era. The point behind the alcohol ban in Methodism was Wesley was going around London feeding the poor. And as he associated with rich people at times, he found out about thousands of tons of grain being put aside so that the rich could have their whiskies, their bourbons, their cognacs, so that they could have these high-end liqueurs. And Wesley said, look, that grain, you could instead live simply, give up alcohol, and then all that grain could be used to make bread to feed these poor people. Notice how that action is so much more rooted in love for others than just, well, alcohol is evil. Even Wesley's going to say, alcohol itself is not bad. He's going to be there. Jesus turned water to wine. It is alcoholic. But what he's going to say is what's more important are those people who could be fed if the grain used to make liquor could be used to make bread. Wesley's social holiness was so effective, it's been credited with preventing a revolution of the poor in England, such as happened in France. Now, when we're in that American context, abolition becomes the focus of social holiness. In England, the slave trade ended in the British Empire in 1807, led by Wilberforce and evangelical Anglicans. Remember, 1807, that in England, there is no separate Methodist church. Even Wesley is simply considered an evangelical Anglican. In America, the Methodist Episcopal Church will divide into North and South over the issue. Wesleyan Methodists will split off in support of abolition in 1847. They are the first denomination ever formed purely on a social justice issue. They did not change their theology one bit. Nazarenes would be the same. Nazarenes would split over the social justice of women in ministry too. And then the Free Methodists would follow a bit later, and it would be a key part of the reasons we split off from. Oh, I do apologize, I'm yawning. From the Methodist Episcopal Church. Many Methodists grab hold of the abolition issue during the Second Great Awakening. And the debate among Methodists was not always for or against abolition. The debate was, should it be gradual or should it be immediate? Should we just petition for slavery to be ended overnight? Or should we gradual in it? And that's one thing, actually, not even within Methodism. That was much about the wider debate within American culture at the time, heading towards the Civil War and things. Gradual or immediate abolition was usually much more the debate than for or against. And social justice is still important to us today. It's still a vitally important part of Wesleyan denominations. I mean, within the Free Methodist Church, we have the Set Free movement, which is all about ending slavery. We especially focus it on sex slavery, but just slavery as a whole. We do a lot as a denomination. And it has been commented upon by many in the anti-slavery world just how much we do, even though we're a small denomination. The Eden Project, which is about earth-keeping social justice. The Seed Project, which is about eliminating poverty through sustainable economic development. International Child Care Ministries, which is about caring for impoverished children, and many of whom are orphans. Even just within our conference, I'm just going to throw out two churches. There's a whole lot more that goes on this. Sanctuary Free Methodist Church has a huge food pantry. Mountain Gospel, my church, we have a big produce giveaway every week. We bring in DHS to help process people. We bring in energy assistance people. We partner with the Salvation Army to bring rent assistance and various things to people. We partner with Goodwill to help with people getting jobs. So there's a whole host that goes on within the Free Methodist Church. And it's about providing integrity to our mission. Social justice is the culmination of our theology of holiness. It's the gospel of freedom put into action. We as a denomination, as Free Methodists, distinguish little between evangelism and social justice. Because if we just preach the word and we do not have action, we have no integrity. And especially to millennials, that's a big red flag. Evangelism and social justice are one and the same. You cannot have one without the other. You cannot have evangelism without social justice, and you cannot have social justice without evangelism. So understand that being part of the Free Methodist Church means being very pro-social justice. And the challenge is to think, what are the social justice issues in my area? So for example, if you're in modern day Portland, you know, there's a huge culture of microbrew and vineyard. Usually we're happy to talk about positive effects of the economy, how much money it brings in, this, that, and the other. But what about wider afield? Vineyards only usually employ 3, 4, 5 people full time. So they don't produce a huge number of jobs necessarily. What is the impact on food prices that all this land has been taken up to make hops and grapes for making of drinks? What is the price of having to import food to cover what we are not producing instead? What are the environmental impacts of having a monoculture where so much of the land is covered by one type of crop? Do we need to address that? What about gentrification? That's an increasingly important issue in Oregon today, and increasing rent rates that are going up way faster than income rates. What about sex slavery in Portland? What about rural areas that have very little economy because their employments in terms of bloggers and that has moved on? These are all good growth edges to talk about, because when we incarnate the kingdom in them, people respond. Social justice goes right to the heart of where someone is broken and gives them the help they need. Social justice shows them that God loves them. Social justice lets them know that the church loves them. Social justice shows that our words are not empty. We carry the full weight of gospel truth, and are said with integrity and honesty. So what about your assignments for this week? Reading. So reading Discipline chapter 3. This is where there's a lot of our stuff on living and how we will live. You're also going to read chapters 9 and 10 from Age to Age, A Living Witness by Leslie Ray Marston. These are his chapters on the history of Methodism coming to America. And then, if you want, you can also read chapter 8 for a bit more reading there. Now, here are your discussion questions this week. So 1, whilst we have a denominational emphasis upon the social issue of slavery, what are the social justice issues in your local congregation or community? How might your church help? I challenge you with this question to think outside the box. Don't go with the easy and acceptable answers, such as feeding the hungry. What are the issues in your context? Gentrification, generational poverty, sex slavery, teen pregnancy. What is something your community is crying out for on a social justice front? 2. After preaching a series on social justice issues today, you meet with one of your congregation. They accuse you, not aggressively, but still with feeling, of bringing too much politics into the church and not fully preaching the word during that series. They remind you that we follow the word of God and not a social gospel. How will you work with them? Okay, with those, I will see you online. Have a great week.